Kia ora koutou, no mai haere mai ki te kōrero te rā, creative resistance. The art of creative resistance, what does that actually mean? Well, that's what we're going to find out today in this session with our guest speakers. And basically going to look at what um, what it means to be within that creative space, to offer resistance, to offer viewpoints and ideas that people might not be so open to accepting. Before we kick it off, though, I'm going to just do a little bit of housekeeping. Called Richard Green Takawengwa. My name is Richard Green. I'm chairing this session. I'm a treaty educator of some 25 years and a creative of some 35 years. I started when I was 5 years old. So, yeah, believe it or not. And I just want to remind you about our community code, which is on the screen in front of you now. We just want you to abide by this. We want to understand that everyone needs to feel safe and in the space to be able to communicate and speak respectfully of other people, listen to other ideas. There are other perspectives. Just because your perspective is different doesn't mean the other person's is wrong. It's just different. And also, particularly, I'm hoping in this session with these wonderful creators we've got, that we don't take each other too seriously at all. And again, we're speaking from our own point of view. You can interact with us via the chat. The chat is being moderated. So questions like, who does your hair, Richard, will probably get moved to the side, relating to more topical based questions. So who are our presenters? Well, we have Tīhema Baker, who is a writer and long listed for the Jan Medicate Acorn Prize for Fiction at the Auckland Book Awards in 24. And his essay, New Zealander of the Year, was placed second in the Landfill Essay Competition in 2023. Author of the young adult novel series and various short stories and essays, and hails from Kapiti. Welcome. And
Yes, good afternoon, Richard.
Kia ora. Sameena is an award-winning comedian, storyteller, actor, writer, director, and blues singer and songwriter, which fascinates me. I love a good blues session, so you have to tell me when your next gig is. Performed all over the world, Edinburgh Fringe, Melbourne Comedy Festival, Brighton Fringe, etc., etc. Outstanding performance in the New Zealand Fringe in 2017. And she just told us before we started off that she came here to do a show and hasn't left because she loves Aotearoa New Zealand. So I can understand that. It's a great place to be, particularly the way the world is at the moment. She's the co-artistic director of The Magnificent Weirdos, a production company created with the aim of putting access and inclusion at the heart of making art. So welcome, Sameena.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
And finally, Te Radar, 30 years in the radio stage and screen scene in Aotearoa, New Zealand. His work rooted in the belief that the medium of humour is an excellent gateway to introduce people to both history and complex modern issues. Lots of awards, comedy and television, his docu comedy stage shows have been in New Zealand, been about New Zealand history and ideas, intoxicating substances, Intoxicana, which I haven't yet seen, and a celebration of the weird world of Kiwi food and cookbooks and cookbookery. Now, I had the pleasure of seeing that at the Comedy Classic last year, I think it was, and haven't laughed so hard in a very long time. So if you want to find a recipe for some sludgy thing with onion and something, I can't remember what it was, which is actually a dessert, go and see the show. So welcome.
We'll do it. We'll do a separate breakout session on that one at the end.
Now, I've done a very poor job of introducing you all, and I think what would be a really nice thing to do is to pick up on my introductions and just flesh out a little bit of how you work in this space. And who wants to go first? And why is it Te Radar? Because I introduced him last.
Seems good to me. Hey, look, kia ora, everyone. Welcome along. This is great. Thank you, Richard. Wonderful introductions. I love an introduction where you think you know things about your panelists because you've had a conversation with them, and then all of a sudden the host drops in all these other interesting facts, and you get sidetracked. Hey, yeah, look, I've been doing a lot of New Zealand storytelling for a long time. I'm curious today, in my role in this conversation, to look at that kind of art of resistance within a kind of a corporate world, and that I do a lot of events. Probably a good half of my work is rural agribusiness within that kind of wider sector of New Zealand. And I'm curious around the kind of little conversations that we can have around those things that we try to be cognizant of when we're doing events, whether they're conferences, whether they're one-off things. You know, look, I'm in a world now where even the use of the word Aotearoa is a political statement with some of the people that I work with, and I work with everyone, right from the Prime Minister, Governor General, all the way through. Invariably, every week, ministers of the Crown, heads of government departments, and various other things. And so it's a really interesting world to be in terms of making those little statements within you know something as simple as doing the housekeeping, bringing in te reo, making sure that I'm not an expert at anything. I'm a Pākehā guy who is brought up in the rural North Waikato and now live in a lifestyle block out in the Waitakites. But within my limited knowledge, to make sure that if I see something that I don't think is right, to say, hey, is that right? Are you doing that correctly? Sort of thing. So that I'm curious to have a conversation around that side of things, because it is a very public part of that performance.
Kia ora, I'd be very interested as we get into that conversation to hear about your relations with ministers of the Crown, with the change of government and the stripping back of te reo and stuff in government departments, whether you managed to have any conversations about that. That would be an interesting kōrero. Tīhema, kia ora.
Kia ora no. Tēnā no koe Richard, o tira aku hoa, Sameena, te reira, tēnei te mihi kia kōrua. Ki ngā kaimahi hoki o tēnei kaupapa, tēnei te mihi. O tira kia koutou e whakarongo ana ki tēnei wānanga kōrero, kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. So yeah, my name's Tīhema, and I'm a writer. Like to think of myself as a storyteller, mostly of fiction. I think my writing that's most well known is probably my book Turncoat, which came out a couple of years ago, which is a satire of the Māori public servant experience. So if I was writing purely what I want to write, I'd be writing a lot of nerdy stuff like science fiction and fantasy, lots of speculative fiction, but I feel compelled to write perhaps more politically minded work, so to speak, which I think Turncoat is definitely one of. Yeah, I think a lot of Māori literature is often characterized by the legacy of colonization at its most overt. So lots of poverty, lots of abuse, lots of addiction, which are important stories that must be told. But I really like to think that Māori writers can actually write anything we want to. And a lot of that is about resistance as well, just perhaps not as obvious as some of the other writing that we're used to. So, for example, writing about Māori public servants. My next book, which I'm awaiting confirmation of release, but I'm hoping to be September this year, is about Māori fathers and the mental health of Māori fathers. So I'm trying to write in spaces that I don't see a lot of content, at least in the literature space. So that's what I'm keen to get into today. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Yes, I had a conversation with a writer who was Māori, and he said, I'm not a Māori writer, I'm a writer who's Māori. And he had written books which had nothing to do with kaupapa Māori, and people were surprised because they thought that's the lane he should be staying in. That's an interesting conversation to think about as well. Sameena, kia ora.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Sameena tōku ingoa no Kashmir aho, he tangata tiriti aho, kei te noho ki te whanganui a Tara. I'm Sameena, I'm from Kashmir, but I live here now, and I'm privileged to be a treaty partner. and I live in Te Whanganui-a-Tara. I'm interested today in the conversations about the continuum of resistance, because of course everybody's resistance looks different depending on where they're coming from and where on the continuum of privilege they sit. So there's some very basic areas in which, the visible areas in which you might say that I have or could be marginalized as a woman or as a brown woman. But there are other areas of privilege that exist in my life. And so for me, resistance is about holding the line in the best way in which you can, finding the points of commonality, and knowing that there are sometimes it's also okay to not have points of commonality and draw very firm lines in the sand. And where do we find those? How do we sit with them? And, none of it is, it's all a movable feast. And that's the kind of interesting thing about it. And yes, to be able to do it with fun, to be able to laugh about it, to be able to, put it in places that are not usually expected is kind of cool. So I'm really interested in what everybody has to say about that.
Kia ora. Now, the art of creative resistance. I'd be interested to understand, there's the word art in there, and there's lots of arts, coming from an arts background, writers and performers and comedians and musicians. And then creative in the sense, a lot of people call themselves creatives nowadays instead of artists. I'd be interested to know what your definition of being a creative is, or being an artist is, and how that applies to your work within the idea of resistance. And I'm not going to choose who goes. You just, somebody jump in. Let's have a conversation about that.
I'll jump in. He says with barely a thought formed in his head around the conversation topic. Look, my entire world is creative. I really don't do anything else, and some of that creativity comes within very defined kind of constructs. Half of what I do, I'm a mercenary. I'm a mouth for hire. I get paid to host events, and so when I think specifically about that phrase, the art of creative resistance, how do I bring some of that kind of kaupapa that I have around what I think Aotearoa New Zealand should look like within these events? How do I bring that in and just seed it through these events when often I might be working for people for whom that is not thought of, or for whom that is not important, for whom that is actively discouraged? And as I say, merely using a smattering of te reo through some housekeeping, for some people that's a bit of a political act and a political statement, which the fact that I'm saying that in 2026 is A, surprising, and B, depressing. But nevertheless, that is the fact the word we're in. So when I think of that creative resistance, what are those little things on a day-to-day basis that we can do just to kind of to prod, to goad, to cement, to normalize those things that we think are important within the culture of Aotearoa?
We'll come back to your goading shortly. I'll be interested to find out how to do that. Sameena, have you thought through this question?
I mean, I think about it often because I do think that human beings are innately creative. It's what we do, creative thinking. You can go into a whole conversation about neurodivergence, for example, which I would say is an evolutionary survival mechanism rather than something that should be marginalized. So we are made to be creative. We are made to be storytellers. We are made to find ways to adapt. That's what we are about. Now, we live in capitalism, and that gets done, that gets absolutely squashed because we have to be commodified, and our existence needs to fit into a way that can be commodified for those who own everything. We resist that. Every act of leisure is an act of resistance. Every act of speaking in public, telling a story, anything that you're not supposed to be doing, all those things that we feel a sort of tiny little guilt for, when you're just lying on the sofa of an afternoon and doing nothing, that's also an act of resistance. So I guess if you're that kind of person and you value creativity, then you will naturally take it into your work. And it doesn't matter where that work is, whether it's in the corporate realm or whether it's in schools or whether it's on the street or whether it's in a theater. I don't know that I can be divorced from my creativity any more than I can stop breathing. And I think most of us, given the opportunity, would thrive in our creativity.
Mm. I think, and that's the opportunity that we have, isn't it, as creatives, is to thrive and to tap into those beliefs that we have. Tīhema, you're a writer,
Yeah,
right?
kia ora. I am.
That's hard. That's a hard choice to make in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Yeah, I think so for many reasons. Just a thought in response to the question is kind of building off what Sameena has said. Like, I just think art is expression. It's for me, it just feels like the way that I can express myself to the fullest extent. And when it comes to resistance, I guess it's the form that is taking is a means of, or as I see it, resistance against empire, against colonization, against capitalism. Yeah, I have some thoughts specifically about writing as a means of doing this for Māori, in that I sometimes feel conflicted as an artist with writing kind of being my chosen art form, I guess. When I go too far down the rabbit hole of thinking about writing being an art form or a form of communication that wasn't traditionally ours, as in Māori, it didn't belong to us, it was brought here. And in many ways, it was a tool used for our colonization. And I wonder about why my 5-year-old self gravitated towards that as an art form versus the many wonderful art forms that our own people have and have had for generations. But where I pull myself back from that way of thinking is that, like many things that were brought here by Pākehā, I think our tupuna saw value in writing, both as a form of communication and as a form of expression. And what that's led to today is Māori writers who are doing incredible things, writing incredible stories, and kind of, bringing the stories of our tupuna and of our whakapapa in a different way, which I think can only be celebrated and only be useful.
Interesting to note that in the 1830s, Māori had one of the highest literacy rates in the world in their own language. So it was definitely embraced, wasn't it, at that stage?
Yeah, I think our people saw the value in it, saw what it can be used for, like many things. Yeah.
I think also, from the colonization perspective of, having been brought up in India, and I think about the notion of rejecting something simply because it's brought to you by the wrong person is sort of a self-defeating thought process. Like, if it's something that works and can be adapted and for those purposes, I think that's perfectly fine. Of course, you have that conversation about, why have I taken this on? Have I taken it on to internalize that colonialism, or have I taken it on because it is something worth taking on? I mean, we had this conversation a lot about when you boycott, for example, or you do things like that. What do you boycott? So in India, for example, during the Quit India movement against the British, did we boycott the railways because they were built by the British to steal all our stuff? No, we definitely used them to get to where we needed to go to do our, protesting. So I think you weigh and balance those things. Hey.
Absolutely. I think that's a tension that our people are dealing with often, is trying to figure out, where is our tikanga or our methods of storytelling, our art, where is that evolving on its own terms versus how is it being influenced by the colonizer? And it's a really tricky line to figure out sometimes. Yeah.
And as you said, that the often the technology and stuff that was brought to assimilate and make Māori subversive as opposed to encourage. So, and turning that on its heel and using it for the betterment is, something that is a positive. And there is no positive out of colonization. I just want to be clear. That sounded better in my head. Tereida, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tool, isn't it, I suppose? I was thinking of my Irish and Scottish ancestors who would have been coming, gosh, in some ways to literacy almost at the same time. When you head back into that period, through the early 1800s and whatnot, there wasn't a high literacy rate, really, in a lot of places. And suddenly, once people are exposed and have the power of words that travel, and you can put it on a page. And I'm thinking of the rise of the printing press, and suddenly those stories. It's hard to shut down a story when that story can be printed on a piece of paper and passed from person to person and retold and retold. And I think, actually, we're having some really interesting conversations at the moment around the new forms of technology. What do we do with our stories when it comes to AI and to storing them online? I know there's a lot of conversations around that. How do we keep an authenticity and an ownership of stories when they go into this kind of great void that is this all-consuming and colonizing data cloud? If you want to look at the new colonizers, have a look at those big tech companies that are gobbling everything up and claiming ownership and usage of everything. And it's almost as if we're having to reimagine where we are within that notion of storytelling once again. The art of creative resistance. When anyone can type something into a computer and create a piece of art, where does that leave people who actually are creatives?
Kia ora. I just want to take you all back a few years, a few more years for me than most. You talked about storytelling and art and learning. Human beings, love learning. I'd say, as a general, we love to have new experiences and we learn in different ways. But learning is something that's innate in us, and that's how we develop stuff. In the last couple of years, there's been quite a movement to remove some access to learning within our school system, breaking down the arts curriculum, removing art history, banning books which might have te reo in them. One of them actually called marae. How you do that, I have no idea. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, how important art is to develop this creative resistance as adults or as teenagers, or what teenagers are like. They've always got some resistance going on. But learning that right from the beginning when we're at school, how important is that to have access to all that information?
I mean,
Is
look,
that a clear question?
yeah, I think education is power, isn't it? But who defines what an education is? There's also a lot of, like elitism around academic education. But how are you allowed to learn? What are you allowed to learn? What is stress? Are we allowed to learn critical thinking? When I went to school, we sort of, debating was a huge part of what we did. But that notion of like, we don't want critical thinkers because critical thinkers will question power. They always will. It's difficult to grow children who are, are sort of revolutionaries when you're constantly telling them to do homework and pass exams and learn, of course you want to learn language and maths and all those things that are going to be useful in life at some point. But also, if you don't know how to paint or write a poem or play an instrument or climb a wall or whatever it is that gives you creative expression, your brain elasticity suffers. So you don't, your problem solving becomes terrible. You become closed, you're not as open. So I think education is a huge place for. And look, expensive. This is why I also don't believe in private schools. I believe that everybody should have the same education in a civilized country because you should have access to the same resources and the same kind of like things to do with, you can't just have rich private schools with music lessons and they get all of those things, right? And then the poor schools have to deal with other things. We need that. We need populations that are questioning and curious, and we need philosophers, and we need people who can continually make the world a more equitable, better, joyful, loving place.
Kia ora.
I mean, because education's a weapon, just like any of the other ones, and it's what you actively do teach and what you actively don't teach.
Yeah.
I remember a few years back, my daughter came home from must have been the fifth, just when she'd started school, end of kindy, started school, and she was reading a story, and she was translating the English words into te reo. Just all the little words that she'd been learning. This was an incredibly natural thing for her to do. And I was thinking, this is great. You know, you've got these young kids, their minds are elastic, they're soaking things up. No one's told them that this is a thing. They haven't said this is a really important thing, or this is this is just a thing. They're learning all of these wonderful things and they're putting into play. And we've seen that weaponization now of that language learning within schools. And I don't think she would be doing that now if she went through at this point in time. So, you know, that what we put into that curriculum is unbelievably important. You know, I still meet people. I met someone the other day. I thought we were past this. You know, New Zealand doesn't really have any history. Yeah, God, Jesus. You know, but when you put it into the curriculum and people are learning, you know, the stories of things that had happened, and suddenly they have a bit of an understanding, and it's never going to be perfect because you're always going to have someone, teachers, other students putting it through their own particular lens of why these things happen, and you're going to have, you know, so much mental space taken up with not only whether it should be there, which is yes, but whose version of it. It's like, well, provide a gorgeous overview of storytelling. That is what every single historical act is. Simply something that translated into a story to allow people to sort of fill in the gaps themselves. Because kids are, you know, or older learners, you know, we're not stupid. So yeah, that ability to have that creative sense and that storytelling, you know, I remember we used to run a stand-up comedy workshop for high school students, and I remember the father of a young woman saying to me, well, you know, my daughter's never going to do stand-up. I don't see the point of her wasting her time on this. I said, no, she's not. We're not actually teaching stand-up. What we're teaching is we're giving people the confidence to stand up in front of a group of people and to express themselves. And they will do this at every family function, at every community meeting, at every workplace, wherever they are through the rest of their lives. It's just focused within this particular thing. So that ability to give people those life skills through the creative arts is, you know, what's the point of education if it's not to give people life skills, you know?
Yeah.
It's so they can recite by rote the times table, te reira. You're missing the point.
I still do use my times table that I did learn by rote.
Have you got thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm just reminded of that saying, we are the stories that we tell. When you control the narratives that our tamariki and our rangatahi are learning, then you control how they think and understand themselves and their history. So I total everything that's been said. And the additional thought that I have is kind of thinking more broadly about education and the focus that seems to be put on those core subjects of maths and English and science, when there are these other things that our rangatahi are so skilled in, but they're not really told by the system that those are valuable. So I'm thinking things like woodwork, metalwork, tactile stuff, like that all seems to be so undervalued by the system. And I think about when I grew up here in Otaki, like, of course I loved English, but all my mates couldn't care less about it. They were interested in building and crafting, and those are such valuable skills as well. And I'd love for the education system to place, you know, as much value on those areas of skill and knowledge, as much as they deserve. Yeah.
Because there's often an academic snobbery, isn't there? That you know, you're only really any good if you've got a degree, and nowadays you have to have a PhD before you can get a job at McDonald's. So it's kind of, there's a real push there, undervaluing those skill jobs that you talk about, those trades, those people who work with their hands and also work with their minds. I mean, you can't be a creative just in isolation with the physical work that you do as a carver, right? So
Absolutely.
I think also there's the idea that like art history being absorbed into one subject. I did art history in the 7th form, and I didn't become an art historian or anything like that. However, what I remember from that is learning, you know, Sameena, you talked about the core subjects, maths and those sorts of things. I learned geometry from studying Leonardo da Vinci. I learned about science from, you know, what they did, the color mixes and the environment of the time and politics all came out of art history. It's not in isolation. And the education system has gone down that track of trying to learn cross subjects rather than just subjects in isolation, but we've kind of pulled back a little bit. I've got a question here, going back to AI. Are panelists in agreement that AI is just bad for te tau and tangata? It's quite a broad question and a hard one.
I mean, I love it. I mean, AI is a tool in the same way that a hammer is a tool. A hammer can build a beautiful house, or I can bash your skull in with it. It's the same hammer. I've used within some of that, what I've used some AI for, I found it to be utterly game changing for how I search for things, the questions I ask it. I think it's, you know, I hate what's being done with it in terms of creating a lot of art and music and various things. But I think, you know, we're a little bit hammer happy at this point in time, where people are just whacking everything with their AI hammer. And I think that I would like to think that people will see through it, particularly this younger generation, and they'll really want to come back to those human-centric experiences. But I think it's you know, woe betide us if we condemn an entire tool simply because it's being misused by some people. And actually, you know, I met someone the other day. They've pre-ordered a little robot to run around their house, and they're going to use it to learn conversational Italian. Imagine, for those of us who don't have the ability to put ourselves in, you know, a place where we can learn te reo on a day-to-day conversational kind of basis. Imagine when we can do that from the comfort of our own homes with some, like a chatbot or a little robot that's running around doing our bits and pieces. My lawn mowing robot. Imagine if I could a lawn mowing robot that we could sit there and have a conversation about nature. And I can improve my language skills. So, you know, I think that there are some real benefits to come from it.
Kia ora. Tīhema?
I might jump in. I'm kind of in a state where I'm trying to educate myself about AI. I don't feel like I know enough about it to kind of have a strong view either way. I think initially I was very like, no, I don't like anything to do with it. But I've been trying to understand AI and its uses more. And there's part of me that sees where te reo's coming from in terms of it being a tool that can be useful. The thing that does scare me about it, from what I understand, is its impact on the environment is quite shocking. It uses a massive amount of energy, and that alone is enough for me to go, well, I'm not sure about this. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm sort of trying to be open-minded, and I'm trying to see what benefits it may or may not have versus the cost of using it. So I'm kind of sitting in a bit of an undecided space personally.
Kia ora.
I mean, I would say that I also am in a learning stage of everything about AI, but I will say this. I think generative AI is despicable, and it is terrible for the environment. It is designed to make people stop thinking. It is very open to the same kind of racism and politicization, because, of course, human beings have to input into that or steal to input into that. So what gets put in there is often racist, is often misogynist, there's lots of those kind of issues around generative AI, especially. I want the kind of AI that can do a keyhole operation, right? I want the kind of AI that makes the human experience a better thing for all of us together. I don't like the kind of AI that reduces us. So in a very simplistic way, when I think about using a calculator to add things, if addition is easy for you and you're not dyspraxic or whatever it is, great to have the calculator. But if I never learned how to do addition, and then you got me a calculator and I always used a calculator, then when the calculator was gone, what you've done is effectively make me less capable. And I think that some of the generative AI is definitely around that. And there's a reason it's owned by 5 evil men, because they do want to control the world in a way. And they don't care if they set the world on fire. They just don't, because they're not going to live forever, and they don't care if they take everyone out with them. They're very, very hollow husks of a soul, people who kind
They
of
are, yeah.
control and dispense this, you know? So I think there's a lot to be learned. There's a lot of regulation that needs to take place. And there's a lot of like looking at which parts of it are better for humanity as a whole and which parts of it we just need to go, no thanks. We can do without that one.
I
mean, they
just wanna-
are. I was going to say, you know, and they are the kind of despicable people, and you see them all through. When I mean, we're here to talk about creativity. We've got beautiful stories on the panel. These are the people that believe you can read all of the modern fiction in 15 minutes. Here's War and Peace condensed to 15 minutes. Boom, I've done it. So they're knocking out, you know, oh, I read 12 books a week. No, you don't. You listen to some AI generated, you know, 15-minute podcast where someone's told you the basic plot lines of one of the great works of art. There's no nuance. There's no subtlety. There's no having to sit in it and go through it sentence by sentence, you know. And so, you know, within that AI world, as I say, they are people that are somewhere on the spectrum of humanity that does not in any way value the essential things that we all think are really important about humanity.
I'm going to move on from the AI conversation because I do realize it's 1:10 already nearly, and we've kind of got a few good questions. I'm sorry I can't do all that. There's some really good comments here about our conversation, which people can read later on, but also Laura said, I want the kind of AI that helps detect cancer early, not the kind that plagiarizes art to make content. I think that's a point that you were making, Sameena, as well. It can be how any tool can be helpful, as we said. It's just how it's used, isn't it? Now I've got a question here, which I think is it's a perennial question, really. What is your advice for tauiwi artists who want to incorporate toi Māori, te ao Māori, in their art as a way to acknowledge this whenua, but don't want to appropriate or be culturally unsafe? Or do we just need to stay away from art forms that aren't in our whakapapa? I'll start with you, Tīhema, on that.
Yeah, I'll do my best. My instinct goes to kind of the wairu of Te Tiriti being a partnership approach. So I think art is, even as a writer, like you know, a lot of what I do is just very solo. I can't do what I do without a community of other writers to draw on, to share things with, to have my work read and, you know, critical feedback and all of that. So I think if I did have advice, it's about you know, establishing connections and networks with those Māori, with those tangata whenua artists, and kind of having the conversation direct with them. How you can do that safely and in a way that respects the mana of the art and of the artists. That's my initial response. I'm sure I have a different one once I mull it a bit longer.
Kia ora. Te reira.
I mean, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right, eh? You know, if you're sitting there thinking, should I be doing this? And there's been a lot of really interesting conversations, particularly in the visual arts world recently, around appropriation. You know, not plagiarism so much, but more that kind of an inappropriate appropriation. But I mean, it's an interesting one. I face it quite regularly. There's a project I'm working on. Use writers to tell certain stories. I'm predominantly in the world of telling historical stories. At what point must I think, well, is that my story to tell? And if it's not my story to tell, how do I get the sense of that story and what happened on that occasion without transgressing some of those things? So it is an ongoing sort of. I mean, it's a living question, isn't it? Because we're all, you know, yeah. I think that basic thing is, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right, and you need to have a step back and have a little think or a discussion about it.
So let me take you back a few years to Radar, to when you had a series called Radar's Checkered Past about New Zealand history. How did you incorporate both Pākehā and Te Ao Māori in that, or did you, or what was the intent behind that? That's because that's nearly 10 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a long time, and that came actually, and that came from a show initially called Hitori that was commissioned by Ngāi Tahu and the Christchurch Arts Festival. And so Ngāi Tahu wanted to, and this is an interesting, Ngāi Tahu wanted to be a part of the Christchurch Arts Festival, but they didn't want to be the Maori part of the arts fair. They didn't want to be sort of over in their little area. So they had a big hui, invited a whole lot of artists, ceramicists, musicians, the whole spectrum, me, and they said, we want to do a project for this particular festival around the nature of pepeha, of putting stories and people into the landscape, because once you've populated a landscape, it suddenly has a whole lot more context and a whole lot more meaning. And I put in a proposal, and back the late great Tahu Pōtiki, they said, yep, that sounds really good. So that actually came specifically from a project that me, a North Island Pākehā, looking around and having a look at around South Island pepeha and finding out what are the stories, and then telling stories based around that. Now, I didn't in any way claim any ownership. I was careful around what the stories were. They actually ended up being there's a lot of it was more often post treaty stories, but that was the basis of that, and so that had worked its way out by the time we got to check it past. So yeah, we were cautious around, I suppose. We did. I mean, that one was straight out supposed to be comedic storytelling, comedic history. So we didn't have anything too contentious, but you can put little twists, those little things in, those little lines, that little statement, that little moment where you nod to the audience and they go, yeah, that wasn't good. That was a bad thing that those people did.
Yeah. Sameena, have you got any thoughts on this?
I mean, just Totoko, what they're saying, but also like, again, when you tell a story, whoever story it is, where are you placing yourself in the story? Are you placing yourself as the expert? Are you placing yourself as someone who's experienced that or heard it? Are you giving your opinion of something that is outside? And also, look, we do as artists, or, you know, as for me as well, there are stories I'd like to tell, which are not my stories to tell. So I just won't. Just because I have the impulse to do something, I want to do it, doesn't mean I should. I think there's a power imbalance in it. These things of cultural appropriation are to do with who has the power. So, you know, if growing up in Britain, I didn't grow up in Britain, I grew up mostly in India, thankfully. But I know from people who've grown up as, brown people in white spaces, that they will, when a white person eats your food or cooks your food, it's like the most amazing thing. And then when you do it, it's like a bit smelly, isn't it? So it's about who gets the kudos for that thing. So I think, and for me, it's a very, I'm learning Te Reo Māori at the moment. I'm trying to understand the culture of the indigenous people of the place, which I've chosen to call my home. I'm very grateful for Tiriti because it gives me a place here, which is a welcoming place rather than as an interloper or an outsider or just an immigrant. I'm welcomed here because of it. It's great. So I think, it's sort of like, where are you putting yourself and how are you telling the story is always like, who has the power?
Kia ora. Now, the arts rely a lot on the support of funders and philanthropists, and particularly in Aotearoa. And people are making choices now in the arts about where they put their money, because actually they're just trying to buy some petrol to take the kids to school, or some shoes, or a packet of mints to make some rissoles. Now, there's a question here. Does the cost of living crisis and increasing poverty likely result in opportunities for creativity in the arts in the community, or stymie it? What's the impact, therefore, on resistance? Or some thoughts on that already, I can see.
I mean, look, I'm going to go back to my straight away, like, this is capitalism, right? Why wouldn't you celebrate your philosophers and your storytellers and your artists? Why wouldn't you have a universal basic income in the world? And if you did, and where it's been tried, when you give people universal basic income, what it does is it takes away the fear of where the next meal is coming from, whether they have a roof over their head, right? And what we have found repeatedly, the evidence shows, is in those kind of situations, people make more art, they build more community, they're kinder to one another because they're not pushed against the wall. So my question is, my offer would be, let's stop spending on defense and having FBI offices and trying to be part of Five Eyes, and let's spend money on our future generations and people living comfortably with one another instead of having to constantly compete with one another. In the present moment, we live in capitalism. We have to do what we want. Of course, hard times bring creativity because you have to be creative when you're trying to live in the world, right? But they shouldn't have to. I'm not a believer that you have to suffer for art. I think you love your art and your art should love you back. And the society in which we live should love art enough to prioritize it.
Kia ora. As a young actor, I always wanted to live in a garret because it sounded romantic. And I actually ended up living in a garret for about 3 months, and it was cold, and I had to climb up and down ladders in the middle of the night, and it wasn't very much fun. So, yeah, tips to my 18-year-old self: garrets aren't fun. Te reira.
Look, I think the best thing we can do at the moment to support art and artists is to let other people know that something is happening. Because even though we are more connected than we've ever been, it is incredibly bloody hard for people to get the word out there that there's a great show on, that something's going on. And actually, I think that if we can really strengthen within our own little communities to say, hey, you should go and see this thing. The best thing that we can do to support other people's creativity is to tell people about other people's creativity. Because there are shows, there are books, there are gallery, there are things that just all of a sudden you go, well, I never saw that. That didn't come up in my crappy Facebook algorithm feed. We used to have when I first started doing shows, and this for anyone who is a child of the 2000s will seem like I'm talking about the Kensington. There were 3 or 4 newspapers in Wellington. You could get arts articles in the morning paper, in the evening paper, in the Wednesday paper, in the weekend paper. There were reviews. You could go to the listings, and everything that was on that weekend was there was a little listing for it because you could get it relatively cheaply unless you wanted to spend a bit more and get a thing. And I think the big danger we face at the moment is not only the cost of the art, it's the ability for people to say, here is something you should read, watch, listen to. So if we don't take anything else away from this conversation, if you see something good, tell people, send people along to it.
Cookbookery. Tīhema.
Yeah, kia ora. I tautoko both those comments, and just as an additional thought, I might make a bit of a shameless plug. I'm part of the Lawrence and Gibson Writers Collective, so that's who published my novel Turncoat. My next one's been published by a traditional publisher. But as a writers collective, the kaupapa is first and foremost to support each other as writers, and how that manifests when it comes to actually publishing a book is we actually produce the books ourselves. So we have access to a press. We go in and we maybe call in some favors and we get people to come and help us, or we give a koha for the art that might go on the cover, print all the books, bind and glue them, distribute all ourselves. And in terms of royalties, they're split 50-50. So 50 comes to the writer, 50 goes back into the collective pot to produce for the funds of production. So I want to shout out to that sort of model, because that's like the community focused, like whanaungatanga based way of promoting and supporting each other as artists to get our work out into the world. And yes, to some extent, like we'll be reliant on funding and bookshops and all the rest of it. But when writers can actually just collaborate and give each other their time, then you can get the arts out there. And it kind of speaks to what Te Reira was talking about, like just word of mouth and sort of supporting the arts actively. There's a lot to be said for it, in my view.
And what's your thoughts on, all of you, your thoughts on if your work's out there in the Creative Commons and people using your creative outputs within resistance practices? Just taking, that's a question from the floor, but basically, what is the role, if any, of the Creative Commons for using creative outputs within resistance practices? How would you feel if somebody used your creative output? I would say without asking, maybe. I don't know if I get a sense of you suddenly thought, well, yeah.
It's difficult to know it depends on the context.
Yeah.
I think if somebody takes away something I've said at a show and has a conversation with it or makes it a part of their conversation, I don't really care. If they're using their words and saying their own words, then I'm just like, well, that's foolish, because you can't say what I'm saying even if you agree with it, because you're a different person. You need to find your own voice for it to be authentic and to be true. If what you're saying is not true, then what's the point? Once it's out there, it's out there. A lot of my work is live. I'm very resistant to putting things online. I know I have to sometimes because people don't know who I am. But one of the things that I love about live performance is that it is an act, it's an anti-capitalist act, because it happens once, it happens in that room with the people in that room, and it cannot be replicated. And we are all going to, that's something that Rupu has now forever. It belongs to us. No one else can have it. And I kind of love that about it. Another thing about making art accessible to people, so that, you know, that goes back to the past question, but I'm just going to quickly say this. Like, there are ways of doing that, like supporting one another in our own communities, but also bringing people in from communities who don't have access to arts, because arts are expensive, tickets are expensive. And I found that very simple things, like I had a season of a show I did at Basement where we did sort of fluid, choose your own price on a sliding scale from $8 to $100. And it averaged out to about $25 for the whole season, which means that a lot of people were paying $8, but a lot of people were paying $60, which is an amount I would never charge for a show. And it sort of also warmed my Marxist heart to think that in shows there was somebody who's paying $60 sitting next to somebody who'd been paying $8, and they were enjoying it together. That's a community thing as well. So I went a little off topic there. Sorry. I think it means intent and consequence is important if you're taking somebody else's work.
Kia ora.
Look, I was at a comedy club just down in Christchurch just a couple of nights ago, and they said I think they have a couple of sessions. No, it's weekly, fortnightly, and it's free for students, And I thought how important that was, not just to let the students in, but for a generation of people who may never have been to live performance. This is a gateway in. How do we? If we've got kids coming through school, or people are, if you don't have the privilege of living near where theatre or things like that are happening, what's that gateway? How do you bring people in to experience art if they don't have the money or the knowledge to take a punt on going and seeing something? So yeah, that ability to, I mean, those new audiences, they're our audiences, and we want to make sure that they get brought in. And likewise, within how do you help people to get their art out there? Collectives are great. Fringes are great. That ability where you can just you can get a whole lot of people in one place to lower those costs. Venues are great. It costs a lot of money to hire a venue, but then you split it between 4 shows over the night during a festival. So again, it goes back to a lot of that kind of collaboration, but yeah, just welcoming people in, encouraging. If there's someone, buy someone a book, buy them a ticket to a show, send them along.
Hold up. We've got a few minutes left. Tīhema, would you like to contribute to that question?
Oh, no, I don't think I have anything to add. I wondered if 5 minutes, if there's questions from people who are listening in, that might be a good use of time.
Yeah, a lot of it's to do with AI, so I'm trying to not go down that rabbit hole. It's obviously something that's very important to people, particularly in the art space, and how that might affect jobs. What I'm going to do, so we're going to finish up, and what I'd like you to have the opportunity to do is to talk about perhaps creative resistance within the arts. And if you were talking to a young creative, a writer, a dancer, a musician, a performer who was thinking about their place in the world as tangata tiriti or tangata whenua, how they could use their creative abilities, their creative skills, to use that in a way that they still retain ownership of their thoughts and beliefs without having to buy into the funding models, the begging for money from crown entities, where they can actually create stuff which is authentic to themselves. If you have an answer to that question, and you've only got about 30 seconds each. So there we go. It's a thesis.
I'm going to say it from my point of view. Don't get hung up on the theory. If you want to make art, figure out how to do it, and just do it. you will find a way to put it on. I used to think that I had a punk rock kind of ethos when it came to putting art on, and then I realized actually I had a very Aotearoa. My way of putting on art, everything from posters to shows, came from that Chris Knoxian school of music and art production, which I think is very kind of New Zealand thing. Just do the art, and you will find an audience, and you'll find a place. Be true. Do you. Because there ain't any other you. There's only you. And your art is going to be great compared to everybody else's art.
Kia ora. Sameena.
What would I say very quickly? I would say abandon capitalism. It's a degenerate philosophy that nurtures what is base and obliterates everything that is good and joyful. Resist commodification, especially of your art. Just do things for the pure enjoyment of them. It's hard to do when we live in late stage capitalism and you need to hustle and monetize, but keep a few things at least to yourself. Make art, enjoy it, love how it makes you feel, let it love you back. Have a nap, walk, daydream. Resistance, revolution is not an event, it's a process and it never ends.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Yeah, only things I have to add I think are similar. But I think your first and primary audience should be yourself. Create the art that is important and meaningful to you. And if you do that, then yeah, it'll find others who are on the same kaupapa as you. It'll find other audiences and you'll get it out into the world somehow. So as long as it's important and meaningful to you, I think that's the most important thing.
Kia ora and kia ora koutou. Thank you so much, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, for your thoughts, and that's gone really fast. I've had a really good time listening to your thoughts and your ideas, and I'm sure everybody else has as well. So to the three of you, I say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your feeling, your experience, and your incredible creativity. And thanks to everybody who tuned in for this session. This recording will be available in an hour, so share it with your friends. It'll be available for a couple of months online. And also it'll be on YouTube later on. Thanks to all the volunteers who make this happen and partners who bring this event to life. I mean, it absolutely, there's a community code just in case you forgot. It's really, really important that all these people who've gotten behind us, all the volunteers who are doing all the tech work, it doesn't happen by just nobody doing anything and contributing to what is a very, very important kaupapa here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Very important, and that we continue doing the work, whether it be creativity, whether it be anti-racism and fertility, whether it be at all. It's all a part of our journey as tangata tiriti, tangata whenua. We're here because of te tiriti, if you're tangata tiriti, and we have to keep recognizing that. And it's not a one-sided equation. We are here to support and do that through art, do that through whatever process you want to do it through, but just keep doing it, because if you sit on the fence, you're letting the status quo happen, and status quo at the moment is still might is right. So on that thought, ka kite anō, kia ora, and have a good rest of your day.
Ngā mihi.
Kia ora, ngā mihi.
Good chats. Thanks, folks. Thanks, audience.